The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Welcome to it, midweek editions here. It's Hail Varsity Radio. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Can always find us on the stream, the Hail Varsity YouTube channel or Hail Varsity Radio Twitter feed at HVarsity Radio. Give Elijah a follow at Herbal Essence for Elijah Herbel and me, Chris Schmidt, at Schmidt_radio. We have things to discuss as the final tune-up for Nebraska on Saturday against Louisiana Tech before it gets real with Michigan and beyond. We'll dive into it here in a little bit. Mike Babcock with us in 15 minutes. We'll check in with Babbers, his thoughts on Nebraska as we don't know that we'll hear tomorrow from Coach Rule where he's leaning quarterback-wise, but at least they'll put to bed most of the week of practice. I know Nebraska will go with more of a, get them ready for Saturday type practice Friday versus the walkthrough Thursday. Evan Bland with us in hour 2 from the Omaha World-Herald, and then we will dive into the Nick Chubb injury with Dr. Brandon Seifert with Nebraska Orthopedic, and a Jock Doc is forthcoming. Numbers to get in, 489-1240, 489-1240, or 800-825-5865. Email Chris at HailVarsity.com. So, off-topic question, but it does relate to football. And there was an unfortunate incident with a Buffalo Bills fan as this fan got tailgating the wrong way. He got covered in some stuff that you don't want to get covered in and woke up and missed the game. I think I've got the gist of that story. Did you see or hear about this?
No.
Yeah. Well, Bills fan had too much to drink, could not take care of his bodily functions.
Okay, I'm following.
And he woke up and the game was over. This, I think, goes back to week 1. I just kind of scanned the story. And you're getting your sea legs, and many of you are experts with tailgating. Don't forget, we're at the Single Barrel tomorrow, 4 to 6 in Lincoln. Come see us there. The Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill Friday. Back at the Single Barrel Saturday noon to 2. So just for your calendar. But my wife has suffered a tailgate injury. You're looking at me kind of like, where's he going with this?
I'm very curious as to where you're going.
Oh, dude, this is brutal. So long and short of it, Mama Bear, the bunny, is her nickname, and her friend Dora and Boots. We're going to keep official names out of this, but they all went down and they tailgated. They popped in. They said, what's up for the road show Saturday as we were at the Single Barrel. And then they went and tailgated. They went to a couple of different lots, hung out with some friends, and there is all sorts of just nasty bugs flying around. And those damn black little pirate bugs bit my wife. And it flew inside her shirt. I can't make this up. It flew inside her shirt. It didn't bite her once or twice, but it got the trifecta in a region. And for the life of me, I still get evil looks. I'm asking if she's doing okay. So are you doing okay, sweetie? So there's a tailgate injury in the Schmidt household.
Are those bites itchy? Like
they are large. They look like an extra nipple. They are huge.
Okay.
But there's like 3 of them in a region. Mm-hmm. If I get too more graphic, I won't come back to work tomorrow because she will have buried me in the backyard.
You didn't hit her with the honey, let me rub some medication on there for you.
You ask me to rub your back when you're sunburned, right? So I did ask her today how she's doing, and if she needs some help. And that I cannot repeat what she said, but it was sweet in her own little tone. So there's a tailgate. You have buddies that are getting into it. It was game 1 of the season last year. You're getting your tailgating sea legs. Maybe the grill's too hot. Maybe you forgot to use the oven mitt. Maybe there was too many things consumed and you tripped over a bumper. You got to get into mid-season form out of the gate. This was not her fault when it comes to said tailgate injury. She got bit right side, and the bug couldn't get free from her little Husker jersey, and I think it flew in through the armpit, and then I think she smashed it, but it had bit 3 times.
It inflicted damage already.
It inflicted damage.
Yeah.
I mean, there needs to be some ointment on that, but yeah. She has not asked my help. She's a medical professional, so she's telling the radio boy to stick with radio.
That reminds me of a friend of mine. I can't remember if I've told this story on the air
Babbers is just blinking at me going, why would you talk about your wife that way, Schmidt?
Well, I'm going to get into one. I know this individual listens to this show, so he's going to remain nameless. I don't want to embarrass him, but there was a Husker Saturday where the game wrapped up, and we go out to a friend's acreage. We go do some camping out there, and this just reminds me of the Buffalo Bills fan where we had a few.
Tailgate injuries are a real thing.
Yeah, and this was more of a camping injury, but it was on a Husker game day, so I'm going to roll with it. And it really reminds me of the Bills fan story because we had a few, and everyone retires off to bed. This individual in the middle of the night had to go. It had to urinate. And they thought they had the tent flap open to go out the flap of the tent.
That is an injury, especially if there's, a beating that follows with the rest of the tent mates.
Yeah, no, this was not one person waking up to bodily fluids covering them following a night of drinking. This was an entire tent full of people waking up to...
Because somebody just forgot to open the tent flap. Why don't you... Listen, if you're going to go camping, it's a rule. I don't care what the temperature is. You get outside... and you go. You don't just mail it in from your knees and just open the flap of the tent.
Even after a night of Fireball?
No. There are rules. We'll take some of your calls. Tailgate injuries. You want to submit some on the stream. Brennan says, I've suffered a tailgate migraine. Yeah. And that can happen when you get 4,000 degrees and it gets a little warm. I had college buddies that missed an entire half of the Nebraska Southern Miss game in '99 because it was 1,000 degrees and they had the wrong type of fluids going. Brennan saying, yes, hangover. I absolutely get the migraine thing going. But we'll dive into some football. We do have a football topic we will get to, I promise. So ask your question and give me your answer with Nebraska football. What is real right now about Nebraska football? What's a mirage? As you've seen this football team through 3 ball games. Who's on the line?
We have Random Mike.
Random Mike. Mike, thanks for calling. Go for it.
Chris, I've been a fan for a long time now.
Appreciate you.
I'm told you sounded like this when you were like 5 years old.
Yeah, I sound like my, bless his soul, I sound a lot like my dad did. So
it's the perfect sports guy radio voice.
That's right. There's no lit cigarette. There's no oxygen tank. There's no whiskey bottle. It's just, I'm lucky to sound this way. I'm thankful for it.
I'll tell you what I'm really excited about. And, they say necessity is the mother of invention. Mm-hmm. We are shorthanded with running backs. We're shorthanded with receivers. But we got 2 big, strong, fast guys that can run and throw. And I'm hearing from people that know more about football that they're not averse to playing both quarterbacks and even at the same time. And I thought we should have done this when we had Crouch and Newcomb, where you get them both kind of in the backfield, and you got 2 guys there that can scramble and throw. And if you're a defense, that's hell to try to cover that.
I don't disagree. Now, I think you'll side with me that Newcomb moving to wingback, while not used like he was his freshman year, was still, a big shot guy where Crouch had hit him downfield. He kind of won the Colorado game for Nebraska in that 2-minute drill, if you remember. And then Newcomb also got Nebraska up off the mat with the game-winning punt return against Kansas in '99 after that hangover loss to Texas, okay? So Newcomb did a ton. And I think both of these guys can do things, and you've already seen Harburg do it, right? You've seen him play H-back, catch the football. I think you could absolutely do it. I think Harburg is maybe a little more sturdy for day-to-day plays, and if you're going to ask one of the two to block, right, Harburg's done that or shows the ability from a size-wise standpoint. Not that Sims isn't a big dude or a tough dude, but Harburg's played H-back briefly, right? So I think you could do that. I think everything's on the table right now. If you're Nebraska,
exactly.
and you can't limit it.
It's going to be fun to watch.
I hope it's fun to watch. And what I mean by that is you just can't keep having turnovers.
No.
Whoever's a quarterback.
Whoever turns over is gone. I mean,
well, there's a little more tape on Sims with the turnover issue and decision-making at quarterback. I think you'll see Sims. You need to see Harburg. You need to see them both, and you need to see them both on the field. If Sims is your guy, let Harburg be one of your options in that H-back, catching the football, running with the football, that slash roll. And if you can put a package together, if Harburg's quarterbacking and you think Sims has the ability to catch the football or stretch a field, try it out. I mean, who knows what's going on in practice this week?
As of right now, your best deep threat's Tommy Hill. Could that be Jeff Sims?
Who knows? Mike, thanks for the phone call, bud.
You got it.
Appreciate you, man. Good to hear from him.
And I like Mike leading off, saying how great your voice is for sports talk radio, because it is perfect. And I was sitting here thinking, I'm like, man, how different would your career been if you would have been narrating audiobooks? Like, imagine 50 Shades of Grey narrated by Chris Schmidt.
Man, that's intense right now. That puts nobody in the mood. Right? We're asking the question, what's real? What's a mirage? Q McMoo is, I guess, how I'm going to say it, chimes in. Defense is real. Gosh, I need glasses. That side of the ball doesn't seem to have a weakness, unfortunately. Play calling on the offensive side is a mirage. Too much trying to be too clever without the pieces to make it work. That was a criticism. Thanks for the input there on the stream. Yeah, if the reverse worked with Tommy Hill, great. It didn't. It was 2nd and 15 from your 4. You got cute on first down. You've used Tommy Hill to go deep. Tough catch, but a catch that could have been made, taking the top off, right, for about a 40, 50-yard gain, and Tommy didn't come up with it. Yeah. So, listen, I hope they keep using Tommy Hill, and I hope Tommy Hill can be making some plays. My quick rundown on what's real with this Nebraska football game through 3 games, first and foremost, is the staff. Okay? You've got attention to detail. You've got guys that are about every minute possibility. You've got organization. You have development. You've seen guys, that's real. Also kind of falls under the staff part. What my takeaway is through 3 games, their coaching and development's good, and I agree that the defense is real. Is the defense going to be perfect? Is the defense not going to get gouged by a Michigan? Possible. Michigan's going to do that to a lot of teams potentially this year. Iowa could do that to some teams if their offense, 41 points, travels. You have games on the schedule that you won't win. You're just not better than offense, defense, special teams. I also think, and I'm ready to say this, I think Fedoni as a go-to playmaker is real. He's just going to keep getting better. Already has 2 touchdowns. Love his catch radius. I like his mentality. And I also think Sims's turnover problems is very real. Okay? I think while there's some good and you hope he's ready to go and has a great performance if you're a Nebraska fan, push comes to shove, I'm betting money that there'll still be turnover problems based on his history. That's just my quick take. I think what might be a mirage right now is your run game. 200 yards the first 3 games. Can this offensive line and the running back room led by Anthony Grant do that against the Michigans of the world? So that's where I'm at right now with real or a mirage.
Mm-hmm. Another thing I want to add to the real list is this team's commitment to physicality. That's not real through the first 3 games. The commitment to physicality. This is a more physical football team than we've seen over the past couple of years, and I'd argue that this team has been more physical than the first 3 opponents on their schedule. Well, that still remain true whenever Michigan's in town. Who knows? But I can guarantee you that team is going to play physical against Michigan. I'm not going to guarantee that they're going to out physical Michigan, but that commitment to physicality has been very real thus far this
No,
month.
you nailed it. That's a big miss by me, but no, physicality absolutely is real. We'll get Babber's take on this. What's real? What's a mirage with Nebraska football right now through 3 games? Maybe Babbers has a story of a tailgate injury. He didn't do much tailgating because he's been covering Nebraska football for 4 decades and been awesome at it. But we'll spend time with Mr. Husker Football. Mike Babcock's on the way at MD Babs on Twitter is where you follow him. Wednesday edition moves forward. It's Hail Varsity.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
We'll get to more of your comments, some thoughts from Coach White as well. Some of your tailgate injuries are coming in the inbox, chris@hailvarsity.com. My wife, the bunny, has suffered a bite by one of those pirate bugs last Saturday. She is not taking it well, but I think she'll be back out there next weekend. She's going to put some ointment on it and give her a go, I think. Greg from Michigan emails in projectile vomit is all he said when it comes to tailgate injury.
That's a minor tailgate injury.
Not if you're in the area of it. It's one thing if you're doing it. It's another thing if you're
if it's splattering on your ankles.
If you're in the crowd.
Yeah.
Yes. Mike Babcock is extremely happy. He's joined the show Wednesday today. Babbers with Hail Varsity, of course, has joined us from his football office. You want Mike's newsletter from Hail Varsity? You want to hear and read about incredible Nebraska storylines? Can ask Mike and send an email to him to get the newsletter with Hail Varsity. Mike B. at hurrdatsports.com. Mike B. at hurrdatsports.com. Babbers, do you have a tailgate injury that you've heard about? Is there a legendary one out there?
No, I don't recall ever having tailgated.
I didn't think you would either. I mean, you've been front and center covering games for the longest time, doing an amazing job at it. So I know. I'm just wondering if there's one. Well, I heard about this one Nebraska fan who wrote into me and said, we put like Griswold, right? The first vacation or the European vacation with the Griswolds where Clark and Ellen didn't communicate with the lighter fluid with the grill. I mean,
I've tried
one of those.
If there have been those kinds of things, I've tried to block them out.
Mike's
it would ruin game day for me.
No, I know. Well,
Mike, on a different note, then, what would you like to hear Schmidt's voice used for? I think he shot down
awful.
50 Shades of Grey.
People said Gilbert Godfrey, rest his soul, Gilbert would rank in front of me about doing the voice, the Aflac Duck voice. Doing 50 Shades of Grey.
Well, I got a message in saying, Schmidt, your voice would be perfect to introduce Derek Jeter in the Yankees starting lineup.
Wow. It's a PA guy. I forget the gentleman that's passed away at Yankee Stadium who did the voice, but Jeter had him record it because that's what was played when he came up to bat was the legendary PA voice of the Yankees voice saying, Jeter, Derek Jeter.
Bob Shepard.
Thank you. I should have known that. But yeah, Bob Shepard.
The legendary voice of Husker Radio, Lyle Brumser.
Lyle was incredible. I mean that
he was. He did it a long time.
He was the standard man. Lyle's incredible. So, Mike, how about there you go, Lyle Bremser reading 50 Shades of Grey. Man, woman, and child.
There I was going to go.
All right, real or a mirage? What is real for Nebraska football, Babbers, through 3 games?
Well, I think you caught it. I think the defense is definitely real. I think that Nebraska has shown that consistently, that the defense can get the job done if the offense doesn't put it in difficult situations, and sometimes even when the offense does, the defense gets them out of it. So I think that's a real thing. Your talk about development, I think, is something that's real in this program. The thing about development is that you have to have an element of patience among the fans, and in this day and age, or this season particularly, when you see what Prime has done at Colorado, the immediate success, compare that, and we'll see how that goes. With Oregon will be a good test in Eugene, and Southern Cal the next week in Boulder. But you have to have patience if you're in a development situation, unlike what Prime has done there. I guess he doesn't like to be called Dion, so what Prime has done.
Babbers, you could call him Dion, and he'd be okay with it.
Yeah, he'd probably have me thrown out of the press box into the air there at Boulder.
Give yourself a little credit.
Folsom Field.
Mike, whenever we talk about real or mirage, though, we've had a couple comments in on the development. What's your take on the development that we've seen thus far under rural Nebraska? Is that real or is that a mirage?
No, I think development is a real thing. I think patience is an element of that. And I think some of the development is happening off the field. In other words, we're not necessarily seeing some of the players that are developing, that are going in a positive direction in the program, but they're not ready to be on the field yet. I think that's part of it. It's just not the guys on the field. But a good example, I think, of development is Heinrich Harvard. I mean, he's made a dramatic, I think, improvement from the spring through fall camp to the point where he got an opportunity to start and really showed, I think, what he could do. I was especially impressed with his unwillingness to slide and to take on tacklers head on. And some of those tacklers, I think, were a little worse for wear, taking him on because of his size and his ferocity, do I want to say, or grit, it was the word that you guys were using earlier. But I think he's an example of development. Matt Rule and his staff decided to keep him. He could have been one of the guys that was essentially, hey, we'll help you find some other place. But they didn't. They kept him. And I do think that he's an example of that development that we're talking about. But there's development going on that we wouldn't necessarily see immediately. That's the thing. I mean, you don't just come in and say, okay, well, we got spring and fall camp and we've developed these guys and they're ready to roll. But in his case, I think that's what's happened.
Mike Babcock with Hail Varsity joining us at MD Babs on Twitter. Mike, what are you unsure about right now? What's a mirage? And I threw in the run game. It's not that I don't like Grant or the possibility of these young pups doing well. They're going to have to moving forward with Nebraska's running back situation. But it's more so the offensive line that's taken a while to get going. And I'm not sneezing at 200 yards. I think that's admirable. I mean, they didn't memory serves, I don't think they ran for 200 yards last year. So there's a commitment to it, to Elijah's point about being a physical offense. I just don't know. This passing game is to the point where they're going to be capable to set up the run. And they're going to have to in a week. They may have to this weekend. And can the run game be more stable? Can it be as good as it's been moving forward in Big Ten play?
Well, 200 yards a game, I think if you could be consistent with that's a good, in this day and age, the way offenses are run, if you can accomplish that, I think that's a good place to start. Now, what's going to happen with the injuries at running back? That's a significant concern, I think, because you're putting it all on basically on Grant. I know Emmett Johnson is number 2 on the depth chart, is in the mix. He's not a real big guy. He doesn't have experience. There's going to be a case of development, what we're talking about, and how fast he can adjust there. Or Quentin Ives, he's 6'2", 185 is what he's listed at. Probably needs to put on a little weight. Maybe has put on some weight. I think the running back the running game is a concern. I think also the passing game, to me, consistency through the air is if you want to talk about things that haven't really materialized in the way that they need to. That's an area where I think you need to be more consistent and be able to attack a little bit more with the passing game and be successful. And we really haven't had Kemp is not been as active as you would hope, or been involved as much as you would hope. The tight ends, certainly Fedoni. I think Borgacher is really a good player as well. And the other thing is that I would say on offense is, how is the fullback fitting in here? I think we need to see more of that. And maybe we will now, given the situation at running back. But I just haven't seen the fullback being as involved as I thought it would be going into the season.
It's Mike Babcock with us here, Hail Varsity Radio, talking what's real and what's a mirage with this Husker football team. And Mike, as we look ahead to Louisiana Tech, I guess I'm going to flip this around and talk real or mirage for them. One of the things that's made some headlines is just the gaudy numbers that their offenses put up, averaging almost 500 yards a game against some weaker opposition, though. And I'm going to get your thoughts on people's concern. I've seen this Louisiana Tech team compared to Georgia Southern. Are they real or are they a mirage in terms of what type of threat they pose to Nebraska?
Well, 2-2, lost to SMU, lost to North Texas.
Yep.
Wins Northwestern State and Florida International. Mm-hmm. I think it's still uncertain what you're going to see. This is not 1998 Eddie Robinson Classic with Tim Rattay and Troy Edwards. That team, Edwards caught 21 passes for 405 yards. Rattay threw for 590 yards against the Huskers. I don't think we're going to see that kind of a thing, but I think we're going to see an offense that's a little more wide open, more like what we saw with Colorado. But Nebraska had how many sacks against Colorado? I think the defense is up to that. Offensively, you just can't keep putting the defense in difficult situations and expect them to come up with it every time. So I think it'll be a difficult thing for Louisiana Tech dealing with this defense.
Mike, real quick, about 30 seconds, tell folks about the Hail Varsity newsletter and what's coming up.
The newsletter, we do it a couple times a week on Tuesdays and either Thursday or Friday. The Tuesdays is historical. The Friday thing is more related to the upcoming game. I really enjoy the opportunity to do it. And I can tell stories, the history part, I can certainly tell stories there. So you get far enough back, like I always say, you get too far back, there's nobody to dispute it. So I try to do a little better than that.
Mike Babcock, Mr. Husker Football, Hail Varsity at MD Babs on Twitter. You want Babber's newsletter with Hail Varsity, Mike B at hurrdatsports.com. Mike, we will see you on Saturday, bud. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, guys. Yeah, we'll see you Saturday.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for hanging out. It's Hail Varsity Radio with you on Wednesday. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. More of your comments in the stream. Open phones for you till 5. Evan Bland with us here. Big thanks to Mike Babcock. Get his newsletter with Hail Varsity, Mike B at hurrdatsports.com. Just to remind you again, it's awesome to get his commentary and historical perspective. We'll get to some of your comments in the stream. 489-1240, 800-825-5865. Greg says the defense and development are real with Nebraska football. What's the Mirage? And that's the topic here, hour one, real or a Mirage with Nebraska football through 3 games. Greg's like, look, 35 points. That's a mirage for Nebraska football moving forward. I think they can put up enough points, control the ball Saturday, Elijah. 35, 40, upper 20s. That's fine. Nebraska wasn't really doing that. They haven't done that since they moved to the Big Ten post-Bo. They just haven't. Post-Tim Beck, they've not put up more than 22 to 24 points a game in Big Ten play. They were good for a solid 30 to 35 with Beck and T Magic and Amir and all those guys that really ran that offense well, coupled with a really good offensive line. But it's been tough sledding, which it's tough sledding for about everybody in the Big Ten offensively. So, you have Cutter that chimed in, and I think he's right here. You mentioned physicality. I love the development from a recruiting standpoint, right? So far, so good when you look at a Cam Lenhart, right? Cam Lenhart's a guy that the staff was able to keep, and he's played well. It's just one guy, but what else is possible with this staff? Now, you can go the other side of it with portal evaluation. How many guys have thrived from the portal that have made their way? And that's a case-by-case situation, but you're waiting for a breakout, aren't you, from an MJ Sherman? You're waiting for a breakout in a good way for a Sims. Mm-hmm. And I think, to be fair, what you got with Kemp's coming along. They're finding ways to get him the ball and target him. He played well against Colorado, got into the end zone. So he's that twitch guy in the slot that you got to be able to use along with Fedoni. So jury's still out on some of the portal additions.
Most of the portal additions, I'd argue.
That's very fair. Mirage, Cutter says, is the O-line. Still way behind where they should be. Listen,
and I disagree with that. And
I just think you're working with what you got, and I'm going to leave it there.
I don't think the Mirage is an offensive line because I don't think anyone
is Benhart better.
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting there.
Okay.
I'm getting there. I'm getting there. The development of the offensive line from last year to this year, I think, is real. I think you've seen guys get better. Benhart, I mean, the one exception being Corcoran, but I don't think the offensive line as a whole is a mirage. I don't think it's legit either. I think what we heard all offseason long was this offensive line can be one of the strengths of the team. If that's the lens you're looking at it through, then yeah, sure, the offensive line's a mirage. I don't think they're one of the strengths of the team. I still think they're the weak point for the most part of that entire team, aside from maybe the turnovers with Jeff Sims. But I don't think they're a mirage because I think we all have pretty clear eyes whenever we see this offensive line. I don't think any of us have hopped on a post-game show, or I don't think you or I have hopped on this radio show and said, you know what, this offensive line, they're great. They're one of the best in the Big Ten. It's not a mirage in that way. I don't think they're where the offensive line needs to be moving forward for what you need from a Husker football team in the way that this offense wants to operate in the long term. They're not there yet, but I don't think I'm prepared to call them a mirage because we've been hard on them. We've been critical of the offensive line.
We've been fair. We've not been evil or mean-spirited. We've been very fair about...
Yeah, critical in a fair way.
Yeah, because I think we can say, look, Benhart's better. Mm-hmm. That's great. I think we've said Lutoski's been pretty good. And I think we've been fair about the offensive line, the left side of it, needing to step their game up. And I think you could see that when Teddy P's healthy and ready to go. But there's a major difference with him there, presumably, than what you've got there now. And there's a domino effect, I would assume, on the line, where guys are trying to cover up and cover spots. That's why they've gone with some of those jumbo packages where they've brought in extra help. Kirk chimes in the stream. Let's get this up there. I really want to see the wide receivers blocking downfield and use the heck out of tight ends in the pass game. I mean, you've seen Fedoni, his role grow. You've seen Borkacher the first game get a couple of grabs against Minnesota. So I think the tight ends are not only a convenient option for a passing game you're not really super confident in. That's one position where you should have a matchup issue, and from a route standpoint, just get him the football out in the flat or get him the football 8-10 yards downfield and let it work that way. But listen, I think the passing game is just going to be what it is, and that is you're not going to be able to win games if you're forced to throw, and you may not even be able to get your running game going because you can't throw consistently. We've got to see that on Saturdays from who's ever quarterbacking. Now, Rule did say this on his radio show last night, so I'm going to bring this up, Kirk. Nebraska averaged, 1.5 knockdowns per play?
Like, elaborate on that.
Okay, so every play.
I think I missed this.
Okay, no, this was good. And this goes back to Nebraska and Ron Brown. Ron Brown and Coach Osborne were like, all right, every play that's a run play or even a pass play, when it comes to blocking, you saw the love that Piper got with his pancake. Mm-hmm. That's a pancake / a knockdown. So on every play, the glory teams of Nebraska, the really good lines of scrimmage teams, or the receiving crew with the Corey Dixons of the world, the Abdul Muhammads, they would average a 1.5 knockdowns per play. So almost two guys got to their back got to meet the turf per play. And if Nebraska can do that moving forward, that means you're decleating somebody. And that 11 on 11 turns into 11 on 9, right?
Does Ben Scott's knockdown count? The one he was flagged on? Does that one count?
I like the effort and the attitude.
Hey, the refs were late with their whistle. I like a guy playing through the whistle, but you still get flagged for it. That's what I wonder. Does that get a check mark on the box from the coaching staff or not?
Well, let's clarify Cutter's comment here. I don't disagree, Elijah. I agree with you in the sense I was saying that the Mirage, because of how much the coaching staff has talked them up, they have improved, but it's not what you expected. I think we're all kind of there, right? They're better, but they're better from what was really bad a season ago when it comes to pass protection in an offense that was calling 45 pass attempts a game.
Oh yeah, and I can understand. That's why I brought that up. They're not the strength of the offense just yet. And if you thought they were going to be from what the coaching staff said this offseason, I can understand that. And maybe we'll get into this next segment. I actually think the defensive line is a lot more of a mirage thus far this year than what the offensive line has been. And we're up against a break, so I'm not going to be able to elaborate on that.
Tell me a little more.
Yeah, we'll get into that after the break.
All right. Numbers to get in, 489-1240, 800-825-5865. Can email Chris at HaleVarsity.com. And what's real, what's a mirage so far with Nebraska football?
Hail Varsity Radio is live. Now, back to Schmitty.
Schmitty's a great guy, but he don't have a brain.
And Elijah.
You want me to speak? When I point at you, yeah.
On Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time this hour, it's Hail Varsity Radio. You can stream the show, the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Give us a follow on the Hail Varsity Radio Twitter feed at HVarsity Radio. Elijah Herbel at Herbal Essence. Chris Schmidt at Schmidt_radio. And as always, podcast, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play is where you go to get the show audio-wise. So, Elijah, let's reset and then expand here. We're talking real or a mirage. We'll get to Evan Bland in about 10 minutes. And you were going to give us something on the defensive line. Are you buying? Is the D-line real from what you've seen? Or is it a mirage to you?
It leans more mirage to me.
Really?
I think there's talent there.
Man.
Don't get me wrong.
Okay, all right.
Don't get me wrong. I think Nebraska's got a solid couple guys in that defensive line. I think more how prepared and ready to go these freshmen are is a bit of a mirage. I think you have the guys like Ty and the guys like Nash. They're a load. And I think whenever the freshmen get in and snaps after that, it makes your job just a little bit easier whenever you've been beaten down by Ty Robinson and Nash Hutmacher for the entire first quarter. Now you get your drive. But whenever I look at the offensive lines that Nebraska has faced to start the year, not a single one of them has impressed me. And very realistically, there's a chance that that's just because Nebraska's defensive line is that good. But Minnesota, the talking point headed into that game against Nebraska was they're going to sling the ball around a little bit more this year because they don't quite like what they have on their offensive line. They haven't been able to find a solid 5.
I think Minnesota, because of their quarterback, listen, both quarterbacks had to throw 44 times because nothing was happening run game-wise, and nothing was happening up the middle run game-wise. And there was no edge to get outside on. I mean, Nebraska's front 6 or 7 or however you want to term it in the 3-3, we'll call it the front 7. Listen, the thing that's been unique about Nebraska, and I'll say they're real. I think the role that the young kids have had, and that's go in there and beat the hell out of the quarterback on third down, like a Lenhart or a Princewell or a Butler. Okay, those guys have all come in and done well. I think it's very real with Nash Hutmacher and his agility. His strength's always been there, but the guy can move, and he's chasing people down. Same with Ty. I mean, Ty, both those guys is a 1-2 punch. They're real, and I think the young guys that come in behind him, they're not being asked right now to carry anything. They're being asked to complement. And even when Ty was done in the second half of that Minnesota game, Nebraska's defensive line didn't really falter. Secondary had a couple of missteps. Offense put him in bad spots. But I think the defensive line's very real.
I just don't think you have faced a team that has enough trust in their offensive line to go body blows against Nebraska just yet. And there are teams on the schedule coming up that I think Husker fans might get a little dose for. I'm not saying it's going to be as bad.
We'll know real in 2 weeks.
Yes.
We'll know very much next 3 weeks. Because Illinois, I mean, their game plan is going to be try and run it down your throat as well.
We haven't seen Nebraska's defensive line stand up to that. Maybe they are real. Maybe that's going to be the proof that I need. But I haven't seen an offensive line that I think has truly tested this Nebraska's defensive line in terms of what they can do running the football.
The thing that will screw Nebraska football this season, if it doesn't get turned around, isn't going to be the defense. It's going to be the offense and what it doesn't do or what position it puts the D in.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Thanks for hanging out. It's Hour 2. It's Hail Varsity Radio. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Could always stream the show, the Hail Varsity YouTube channel, Hail Varsity Radio Twitter feed at HVarsity Radio. And check out the show that way. Podcast as well. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, or where you hear us on the Hail Varsity Radio Network. Keep your comments coming. We'll get to those around 5:20 in the stream on Nebraska and just some observations you have as the fan on the offense and defense as we've kicked off the topic, real or a mirage. We've laid out some things that we think. We love your input as well. Let's talk some more Nebraska with Evan Bland of the Omaha World-Herald at Evan Bland, OWH on Twitter. Evan, midweek is here, bud. How we doing?
Hanging in. It's a part of a nice little stretch of home games too, and the weather's turning. It's all good.
I love this time of year. It is fantastic temperatures. Truth be told, I am dreaming of having a good second hour, good second half, as they say, racing to my favorite spot, buying the biggest T-bone there is, and baked potato, and then just pouring a whiskey and sitting out and having a nice midweek edition dinner. Because of the weather, I can grill. I can still grill. It's incredible.
Yeah, you got the grilling on the one hand. You can go, I have young kids, so you can go s'mores and doughboys and all kinds of different things. It's a versatile time of year. You got to get out that quarter zip, and yeah, you can go a lot of different ways.
We are gonna coordinate that first 60-degree day Evan, that's a Wednesday. We're going to get you on camera, and you and I will both wear our quarter zips.
Sounds great.
We'll do it. Sounds like Evan and I have a closet full to choose from. So Nebraska's dealing with the injury bug, Evan, and I know you've spent time this week talking and writing about it. And what's your thought on Nebraska right now? I want to get your take on the real or a mirage topic we've spent time on. And give me one thing you think's real about the football team. Give me a thing that's a mirage, or maybe to put a different way, you have a question mark about with the team going in to Saturday and beyond Big Ten play.
Well, I think the defense is real. The second half against Colorado notwithstanding, it's been really interesting to watch because they've been able to play so many guys with hardly a drop-off at all. I think the number is 30 different defenders that have played at least 10 snaps on defense, and you think about the first 3 games for Nebraska, I mean, we're not talking a lot of garbage time necessarily. I mean, a little bit in the fourth quarter against Colorado and maybe a little bit late against Northern Illinois, but you're seeing 20 guys pretty much rotating in there in critical situations. So that seems to be real. It seems to be a strength along the defensive line. I think I kind of thought the secondary and the linebacking group would be a strength, and that's held up and had even a little bit more depth maybe than we would have expected. So, I think that'll certainly continue this week with Louisiana Tech, that's dealing with injuries of its own at quarterback and running back and some of the skill positions. Obviously, that'll be put to the test with Michigan the week after that. But it does seem like that's going to be the group that you can continue to rely on. Mirage, or what I'm curious about, I feel like the jury is still kind of out on special teams and what exactly that can be. I mean, we've seen a good game from Brian Buschini. We've seen, one where he was spraying it a little bit up in Colorado, and that might have been injury-related. We've only seen a couple field goal attempts from Tristan Alvano. The one good return on kickoffs was from Ramir Johnson, and he's out for the year. So, it feels like that group has graduated from being sort of the liability that it's been in the past, certainly a couple years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. But I wonder if it can provide that spark, that blocked punt, that big return, a clutch field goal. It just hasn't really shown up yet. And when you talk about embarking on Big Ten play, there are going to be a lot of tight games, a lot of situations where you're maybe going to need a lift from a surprise contributor. And I'll be curious to see if special teams is up to the task.
It's Evan Bland with us here from the Omaha World-Herald, talking some real or mirage. It's been our topic of the day here on Hail Varsity Radio. And Evan, some people seem to disagree with me, and that's okay. It's not the first time people have disagreed with my takes, and I'm sure it won't be the last either. But I think that the defensive line, what we've seen from them so far, could be a mirage. And I'm not willing to put that firmly in the mirage category. I want to see a little bit more, but I don't think they've necessarily gone up against a team that is really going to commit itself to the running game. And maybe that's because that nobody's wanted to run against the Husker defensive line, but I don't think that the teams they've played were teams that wanted to run the football against this Husker defense all night long. And I'm not quite sure that defensive line is as real as it's made out to be right now. What's your take on the defensive line?
Yeah, I mean, you could make that argument. Minnesota seemed like they went to the pass game quicker than they have in the past. Certainly Colorado had very little interest in running it. Northern Illinois, they tried for a while, and guys like Nash Hutmaker were just dominating the center in a one-on-one type of situation, so you couldn't really gauge that all that well either. But I think about that unit as it came into the year. We knew Ty Robinson was sort of the resident veteran there. It felt like Nash Hutmaker was going to take a step. That's certainly to this point proven to be the case. And then you just kind of wondered with that next group of guys, would they be up to the task? Would they be able to hold up physically? I think Cam Lenhart has certainly acquitted himself well. Prince William and Mielin, same sort of deal. You can kind of just go down the line a little bit, and they've found some guys. A.J. Rollins got a little bit of run against Northern Illinois last week as well. And you can kind of start talking about that jack spot too. Jamari Butler's had a couple of sacks. Chief Borders and MJ Sherman. So, I think they have the bodies, but certainly if you want to make the case that their opponents at this point have not been hard-nosed rushing teams that have wanted to pound you on the ground for 4 quarters, I think you could make that argument. But, again, like some of the individual developments that we've seen with guys like Nash, who I think stands out specifically, is notable. And then you hear defenders this week saying, it makes a difference when you hit hard on Tuesdays and Wednesdays and you're practicing tackling and you're sort of toughened up so that on Saturdays that's not the difference, but that's just kind of the norm of what you've had. So it feels like this is a group that's sort of steeled for the black and blue Big Ten and ground and pound that we're going to see. But certainly, Michigan in a couple weeks is going to be the ultimate test of that.
Evan Bland's with us here from the Omaha World-Herald at Evan Bland, OWH on Twitter. Evan, you wrote about the quarterback decision that looms for Saturday in your latest story, and you did a little research on Rhule's history with quarterbacks, and Sims is kind of a new era, new Rhule situation, because before Rhule left, there was no portal. There was transfer opportunity. But Rhule's a guy that had always, at some point, if he had to make a quarterback change, he went young, didn't he?
Yeah, it was interesting. I asked him about that on Monday, and he pointed out, when he was at Temple his first year in 2013, he inserted P.J. Walker midway through that year, and he was the guy for the next 3.5 seasons. And a similar situation at Baylor in 2017. Charlie Brewer enters in like Game 5 or Game 6 or whatever, and doesn't come out like for the rest of Matt Rhule's time in Waco. So what I thought was interesting, though, was that when you look at the situations that led to both of those freshmen, they didn't start Game 1. They got their opportunities because the guy or guys ahead of them were injured and ineffective with turnovers. And so it kind of reminds you a little bit of the current situation at Nebraska. So I'm not saying that Heinrich Harburg's going to start Saturday and never going to come out again, but that precedent has been there at other points in Matt Rhule's career. So I thought that was interesting. And certainly he's a guy who's talked a lot about building this program, year one, setting the culture, and you're going to build off of this into the future. Heinrich Harburg, has multiple years of eligibility remaining. If you feel like he is the guy or can be capable of being the guy, there is a history in Matt Rhule's background that says, he's willing to go with that person, building him up and kind of bringing the team along. So we'll see if that plays out. Some of the circumstances are different. Jeff Sims was the handpicked guy out of the portal. They felt like he was the guy throughout the offseason. And so how much difference then does 3 games make in that calculation? I think we'll find out Saturday night or Saturday afternoon. I think my opinion at this point is that you'll probably see both of them in some regard. And I do think when you look at not just Louisiana Tech, but into Michigan and beyond, like this is the last week. If you're going to put a guy out there, this is that sort of get-right week where you start to feel you can have guys feel better about themselves, find some success. And I think that could be valuable for a guy like Sims after a couple of rough weeks to start, that he could feel good about himself heading into Big Ten play.
Evan, do you think we'll know who the starter will be moving forward by about 6 o'clock on Saturday? Do you think that question gets answered against Louisiana Tech, or do you think we're going to have another week of this discussion next week as we get geared up for the Michigan game?
My hunch would be we're going to have another week of this. Like, Louisiana Tech's defense is probably the worst that Nebraska is going to see this year, statistically. I mean, you look at it, I think they're going to be able to run the ball with whoever's in there. Your quarterback, whether that's Sims or Harburg, I don't think is going to be under too much pressure to pass very much, and certainly Nebraska has shown that it's not been willing to pass all that much to this point. So I don't know how much you answer there unless one of those guys comes in and really struggles and the other guy lights it up. To me, this is a chance where maybe you see both guys at different points, maybe even in different roles. We'll see. But then, I think it's going to come down to Michigan and beyond. Like, you're going to have to prove it against a Big Ten defense. And I just, I don't see that necessarily manifesting this week against a Conference USA team.
Evan, what do you think you have in Harburg? You've got a kid that's loyal. You've got an in-state kid that's tough. He's got some tools, recruited as a passer, if you remember, based on his time in Kearney Catholic, that was mobile. But you just hadn't had the watering that's necessary. Now he's been watered. He's got some confidence. He handled himself well. Is he a guy that is going to be asked in his career to manage, say he wins the job at some point in his career, to just manage and make a few plays? Or do you think he's got the ability to be a playmaker and difference maker at quarterback in the Big Ten?
Well, I mean, I think we saw some of that difference-making ability against Northern Illinois. Just, you remember him from high school. He was a guy who could jump out of the gym as a basketball player. He could dunk. Like he's one of the faster guys, one of the more explosive athletes on the team. So, like, if you think Jeff Sims is more explosive, and maybe he is, it's not by much, just from a metrics or measurables sort of standpoint. So I think he's got that going for him. Like you said, he comes from a passing system in high school, so that part's not new to him. He's a smart guy. I know he had 4.0 or maybe above that in high school, was an early enrollee at Nebraska, quick processor. So you think that he probably has a lot of those pieces and those intangibles to jump in and do this. What I think is interesting is kind of bringing it back to the defense a little bit. Like, I think before the season, the thought internally and from the outside was that the defense could be good, but maybe not as good as it's been. And so if you feel like you need to win some high-scoring games, you probably want to go with a guy like Sims, who's done it before, who can score from 60 yards out with his legs. I wonder now, after you see how the Northern Illinois game turned out, and just how dominant potentially that Nebraska defense can be, maybe you do place more value on ball security and game management, just knowing that there is a reasonable path to victory as long as you don't give it away. And so far that's something Harburg has in his favor, and you would think that he's going to get more opportunities to continue to show that this week.
It's Evan Bland with us here, Hail Varsity Radio. And Evan, I think we'll get you out of here on this. We got about 90 seconds left. Nebraska wins the game on Saturday and I know it doesn't carry as much weight as a game like Colorado or Minnesota in terms of what Nebraska needs to do. You assume they have the talent advantage, but what does Nebraska need to get done on Saturday?
I think it's pretty straightforward. I think you got to run the ball a lot. I mean, again, Louisiana Tech was the worst FBS team in the country last year at stopping the run. They're not that much better at it this year. I know they've had a couple of games against an FCS opponent that maybe alters those numbers a little bit, but I think you have to run it. But I also think when you look ahead toward Big Ten play, you got to start figuring out something in the pass game. You got to start finding ways to get Billy Kemp the ball in space, or more targets for Thomas Fidone, or maybe you get a freshman receiver going like Malachi Coleman or Jalen Lloyd. I just think, again, if Nebraska wants to win this game, they're going to run it. But I do think this is the week. This has to be that last week where you also try some other players, try some other things that you can use carrying forward that's going to win you some games in the league.
So Evan Bland says Anthony Grant has the Roy Halou game on. I'm kidding. I'm sorry to put words there. I just thought it'd be kind of funny. But Evan, no, I get you. Why not? If this is a team you can line up and smoke, listen, figure out a way to get comfortable with some things that you're actually going to call in Big Ten action, and we'll see if Nebraska does it. Evan, always love talking with you, man. We'll see you on Saturday. Thanks for a few minutes.
Hey, thanks, guys.
Appreciate it. There he is, Evan Bland, Omaha World-Herald. Find him on Twitter at Evan Bland, OWH. Open phones here next with Hail Varsity.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for spending time. Be sure to get the podcast, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play with Hail Varsity Radio. Get that downloaded, get that subscribed to, and get your comments in on the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. So Chase asks the question about Fidone. We're talking real or a mirage. I think Thomas Fidone's production, as it's ramped up, 4 catches, 40-plus yards last week. A couple of targets against Colorado. Really nice catch on a couple of sideline routes. I think there's chemistry between him and Harburg. And Chase was asking, do you think the improvements of Fidone in the last game, mostly due to his relationship with Haarberg. Will Fedoni production drop if Sims is quarterback? Listen, him and Borkature, Elijah, got to be primary targets with where Nebraska's passing game is at right now.
Well, and that's where I was going to go, is the fact that I think it's less due to the quarterback and more due to play calling.
Yeah.
Whenever you have two quarterbacks who, as far as I can tell, are both about one-read guys.
Fair.
I think it comes down to the play calling of making the tight end your first read in your passing concepts that you're calling. And finding concepts that are going to be able to take advantage of what that tight end brings to the system. And Fedoni's had a couple of catches, too, on broken plays, sitting down in the opening in his zone and letting the quarterback
scramble drill.
So you have that element as well, and I think that those are the plays that you can come down to maybe chemistry. You know, Haarberg's rolling outside. He's panicking a little bit, knowing he's trying to make a play, and the first place his mind goes is Fedoni. That might be a little bit more due to relationship, but I think based on the usage we saw against Northern Illinois, I think that's more down to play calling and play design and trying to say, you know what, we have a guy in our offense that presents a matchup nightmare to a lot of defenses. Let's make this the first guy in our route concept, as opposed to guys like Billy Kemp and guys like Alex Bullock. That's no discredit to them. I just think you have more of a matchup problem for defenses with what Fedoni has with his frame and his athleticism.
What I've liked from Fedoni, too, is just how aggressive and he continues to get better at mauling people, right? I mean, he got very physical with the Colorado secondary. He had a good day of blocking from what it looks like last Saturday, and he'll continue to do that. I mean, it's going to be out of necessity here. I think there's great chemistry. I think they're comfortable. I think they grew up. If you read Mitch's story with The Athletic, Mitch Sherman's, I mean, they've been working together a while with the Warren Academy, so they're not strangers to one another, and you just hope that continues. And listen, if Sims is quarterback, he better find Fedoni.
Mm-hmm. Well,
right? Especially how nice would the old play action roll right, find the old Mike McNeil safety blanket out in the flat for a 6-yard completion that turns into a 13-yard gain.
Well, it's about identity, right? Offensive identity. And that's something Nebraska struggled with through the first two games. And I think there's a reason why when Fedoni becomes a bigger part of the offense on Saturday against Northern Illinois, we, after that game, said, you know what, it starts to feel like Nebraska is starting to develop an offensive identity. I think it's because the coaching staff realized through the first two games you have a problem guy for defenses in Fedoni, and that can be a tight play.
You don't have a lot of guys that you can say that about right now on offense.
No.
I mean, Kemp's not fun to tackle in space. Grant's no fun to try and take down, especially if you're a guy from the secondary. He's going to go headhunt you, right? And Grant will have another opportunity at that. But I mean, Fedoni's and Borkature, too, as up the seam, are two options.
And I think whenever I think about the guys on this offense right now that do present matchup problems to defenses, you think of the potential of Bonner, even though he hasn't quite shown it thus far. I think the athleticism that he can have coming out of the backfield, being a guy who's going to be matched up on a linebacker, hasn't quite been taken advantage of enough, and you're not sure what's going on behind the scenes there, but I think there's a potential guy there, and you want to see a little bit more out of him, or really from any of the fullbacks. Fedoni is the top guy, probably within the offense in terms of matchup problems, and then outside of that, it's probably the quarterback in his legs, what he can do, because both those guys, Sims and Haarberg, those are guys that are the size from a height and weight standpoint of a linebacker in the Big Ten, but those guys have the wheels of a defensive back, and that presents some problems whenever those guys have the ball in their hands, and I think that's why you look at Saturday, maybe Nebraska's developing an offensive identity, because what was it? It was a lot of quarterback run, a lot of looking for Fedoni.
I love Kent, because Kent's top rope, steel chair, email chris@halevarsity.com. He's got us here. Wait, you two are talking about potential explosiveness with the 99th ranked offense?
Hey, the potential's still there.
We said the P word, and we said, to preface it first, Kent, look, the offense doesn't have a lot of options right now, and I think between the tight end and the quarterback run game, those are your two positions, tight end and quarterback, that you feel those are it right now. Maybe Grant. But no, we're not saying this offense is great. We're not saying this offense is explosive. We're saying if you had to say what could help make an explosive play happen, it is going to be the tight end. It's going to be the quarterback run game. And
or at least the threat of the quarterback run.
The threat, thank you. But, no, I mean, your memory serves, you've got a 26-yard gain. That's your season long on that slant route to Washington. Got a couple of 20-yard gains by Fedoni and Billy Kemp. Your screen pass to Gabe went for 14, but at least it was completed, right? You had to go back to probably the Obama administration the last time a screen pass was completed.
And it's funny you brought that play up because I kind of forgot about this on my rewatch.
Another back.
If you go watch that, Northern Illinois is showing pressure, and this is probably the thing that impressed me most about Heinrich Harburg's game on Saturday. I am pretty sure he checked
into audible
the
into
play.
it?
He does some pre-snap motion, or not some pre-snap motion, some pre-snap signaling there whenever Northern Illinois shows blitz, and what do they come out with the screen? I think that was a pre-snap check by Heinrich Harburg into the screenplay. And if it was, which we haven't heard anything official from the coaching staff on that, I don't think they probably will give us anything on that. If that was, though, a check into the screenplay after Northern Illinois shows pressure, that would be one of the most impressive parts of the Heinrich Harburg performance to me from Saturday, but maybe we'll never know.
Kent, so I hope you're all right. I hope you're getting our full context here. Couple more emails to get to, Chris@HaleVarsity.com. The topic that Elijah brought up when it comes to what audiobook he would like me to narrate. Elijah threw out the 50 Shades of Grey. That made many ill. Austin says, Chris is the Morgan Freeman of Husker Radio. Any chance we get to a spot where full second-team offense and defense see more than a few minutes of the game this weekend? Austin, thanks for listening. Thanks for the email. I am not going to start my Morgan Freeman, prison isn't a fairy tale worried narration. It's not Michigan week yet. But no, I think you'll be able, based on what Evan was talking about, some of the research we've looked at, Nebraska, if they take care of the football and stick to what they are, could name their score early, and then they could probably work on what they want to work on without trying to show too much second half. Now, the question is, you're at the point right now with both of your quarterback options, really all three, that they all need work in the passing game. And whether the score is tied or you're up 2 touchdowns or down a score, it's all relative because you're going to need it at some point, Michigan and beyond. So let them get the work in. But first and foremost, be able to line up and run it. And then figure out a way to get someone deep on play action. Evan brought up a good point. I'm interested with, okay, is Saturday the day some of those freshman wideouts that have track speed, can they take the top off of defense and get deep to put a little bit of fear in a defense? Because you need that. We've talked about Fedoni. We know Grant's going to be the guy. And you know Harburg or Sims going to be carrying it. You'll see some quarterback run. You'll see some zone read. You'll see some option. Great. But push comes to shove, you're going to need to be able to throw the football. And that's been talked about by Satterfield.
And one of the things that's going to be really important, I think, in that is we've talked about finding a guy that can take the top off the defense. We heard yesterday from Satterfield, man, Malachi Coleman, he vomited at practice yesterday because we told him to take a break and he wants to show something.
It's a vomit alert.
This game on Saturday might be one of the last chances that some of these freshmen get in terms of a tune-up game to show this coaching staff, hey, I'm going to be ready for conference play. You can feel a little bit better. I mean, it's the same thing we talked about last week with Harburg, with him getting started against Northern Illinois. It's a chance to show the coaching staff what you have in the back pocket. You can say the same about this game with Northern Illinois. Heinrich Harburg's shown what he has. Which freshmen or younger guys in that offense? You talk about Quentin Ives maybe needing to step up in the running back room. Coleman and Lloyd and maybe Doss once he's healthy being guys that can step up in that wide receiver room and show the coaching staff, hey, in the back pocket, whenever you need a guy to take the top off the defense, I can come in for a play. This is a chance for those guys as well to show what they have to the coaching staff against Louisiana Tech before the games really, really start getting important and the games start getting more difficult.
489-1240, 800-825-5865. More of your comments in the stream. Ways to catch the show can go to YouTube and find the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Always want to continue to promote that. It's archived. It's also live for you 4 to 6. And then don't forget the Hail Varsity YouTube channel at HVarsity Radio. Check out the show on Twitter that way. Come see us tomorrow. We're at the Single Barrel, 9th and P, downtown inside the Graduate, a Thursday road show. So if you need a whiskey, they have 200 to choose from. Get a whiskey, get yourself a big old steak, maybe some chops. Since it is Thursday, I'm sure an appetizer and a drink is in order. Get your weekend going the right way with Single Barrel. We'll be there Thursday at the Hail Varsity Sports Bar on Friday, and then back at the Single Barrel noon to 2 Saturday pregame show as we get you ready for Louisiana Tech. Reminder to get yourself buckled up. Use your seatbelt. It saves lives. It prevents injuries only if properly worn. Buckle up. A message from the Nebraska Department of Highway Safety Office. One of the most disgusting things you saw this week had to be Nick Chubb's injury. And that is all sorts of gross. You are sick for Nick Chubb, great running back. Cleveland is going to go with Kareem Hunt. He is back after being with them 4 years after getting, showing his way out of Kansas City because of some behavior issues. So Hunt will be the guy, but Chubb, I hope he can come back. But man, 8 years in the league, 8 great years in the league. And to have that happen to the same leg, the same knee that he had in Georgia.
In the first place, your mind went after watching that injury with some of the bad ones we've seen through the years. Joe Theismann on Monday Night Football is one you went back to. You go back to, was it where the Louisville basketball player, his leg broke.
Well,
Paul
and
George.
even the way Searles described Bridgewater's injury in Minnesota, he was on the field for that one. Jock Doc's on the way. Hail Varsity continues.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back into it. It's Hail Varsity Radio. Time for a Jock Doc Wednesday. Nebraska Orthopedic Center. Dr. Brandon Seifert with us. And Dr. Brandon, good to spend time with you. And as a Nick Chubb fantasy owner and, well, a human, first and foremost, you got sick to your stomach with what was on Monday night. And unfortunately for Nick Chubb, same leg, same knee, now 8 years apart. What's your reaction to Chubb's injury?
Just brutal seeing that poor guy, to think about having to have that happen twice to somebody. I can't imagine. It was interesting. I did see a picture the other day where somebody had lined up the original injury that he had with this one. And again, just two kind of gruesome injuries. As a healthcare provider, a sports medicine coverage person, you see an injury like that and immediately your mind goes, okay, like worst case scenario here, we're talking about something very, very serious where somebody could have a blood vessel, the big artery in the back of your leg taken out with that, not just even thinking about the sports side of it, more just like saving an extremity. You start to think about those things in this kind of situation.
It's Dr. Brandon Seifert with us here at Jock Doc Wednesday on Hail Varsity Radio. And Dr. Brandon, you said you saw the picture. Tell me, whenever you saw that image, what was your first thought in terms of what structures could be at risk? We don't have an official diagnosis from the Browns or from Nick Chubb on what's actually been torn. I think we can assume it's a couple of ligaments, but where's the first place your mind went knowing what he's already torn before in his Georgia career before this?
Yeah, so you look at an injury like that, the biggest thing you think about, we're so used to hearing about an ACL tear, those kinds of things. And so that obviously is at risk. But the other thing you worry about when the knee gets, pushed in that direction, kind of that hyperextension type direction, the PCL, which we call the posterior cruciate ligament, that's that ligament in the back of the knee. Anytime somebody goes into that really hyperextension, that you worry about that becoming injured. And then from there, you can kind of go either way. If the knee starts to slide more towards the inside, then you worry more about taking out the MCL in addition to the PCL. If it starts to slide more to that kind of back and outside, then you worry more about taking out what we call the posterior lateral corner, which is kind of the outside corner of your knee. There's a bunch of ligamentous and tendinous structures out there, which is obviously an area you had before. And ultimately, when you have a deformity that's that bad, you start talking about, a knee dislocation where the whole knee joint itself dislocates, which is a terrible problem to have. And again, you start to wander into that land of, a multi-ligamentous knee injury when more than one ligament's being injured. And those would be kind of the main ligamentous structures. You take that a step further, you even start thinking about, okay, with that kind of deforming force going through the knee, what else can happen? You start even thinking about fractures. Could you fracture the top part of that tibia? That's a possibility. You can even have a fracture at the end of your femur, which is the thigh bone. And then you even start to go from there. And the things we really worry about, as I mentioned before, is, one, you can stretch your nerve. You can tear your nerve in half. That basically controls the foot. You can end up with a drop foot. You can also obviously tear the main artery in the back of your knee called the popliteal vessels. And that can lead to, obviously, a limb-threatening situation.
You had immediate medical attention, and Chubb was cared for and gotten to a hospital. Going back to Georgia, and this is what made Chubb slide to that second round, was 2015 at Georgia, where same leg, MCL, PCL, LCL, where it was just that left leg blown up, that knee blown up. He rehabs, he comes back, and he's been an elite running back despite having a major issue out of college, Dr. Brandon, and then to have it done to the same leg, same knee 8 years later, to just underline that again. Can a guy come back from it twice?
Yeah, that's a great question, Christian. We really are kind of in uncharted waters with that type of injury. I've not heard anybody any time here recently that's had a similar deal where they had a similar multi-ligamentous knee injury. And really, quite remarkably, you think about him even making it back after that first gruesome injury is really incredible. Fortunately for him, when he had that original terrible knee injury, he didn't damage any vascular structures and also didn't damage any nerve structures, which allows for at least a potential to return back. But even still, that's such a brutal injury. Again, I'm amazed he made it back the first time. So you start to put some predictions on that. Can you make it back the second time? And the question would be, do you have the desire to want to do that and put yourself back at risk? Two, I think it's going to be extremely difficult for him to get back, to that level at this point after this injury. You're going to be dealing with a lot of, potentially early on stiffness. But the other thing you worry about is now you're potentially having to reconstruct all that stuff you did before. Are you ever going to be able to get him back to the same level of kind of tightness he was, stability that he had before? My suspicions would be no. It's really hard in a revision situation, especially revision multi-ligamentous knee injury, to reestablish that ultimate stability that he likely will need. So that'll be the big question. And then you start thinking about, where are you going to borrow tissue from to do all this reconstruction? He's going to have some cadaver grafts used. We know that cadaver grafts are, nowhere near as durable and as strong as like your regular tissue. And so now you start to wander into those areas, and then his risk of, repeat injury just continues to go up from there. And so I think this is a pretty reasonable discussion with him about, hey, this might be time to think about retirement.
Have you ever dealt with, or is there a case study on reconstructing reconstruction?
There are some reports out there that we've seen. They're pretty rare, though. Most of the time when these athletes get into these really high-level multi-ligamentous type knee injuries, a lot of those folks struggle ever just to get back, initially after that first one. And so when they do get back, usually that knee is pretty stiff. And, I just haven't seen, unfortunately, I've not had any of my athletes get back into that scenario where they had a recurrent injury there. I have had, a couple of these folks that I've taken care of that had these big ligamentous knee reconstructions that, most of them fortunately made it back, but some don't. It's such a monster kind of trauma to that area. So, again, speaking from experience of having to reconstruct these, I don't have a huge volume to comment from.
What does a reconstructed knee look like 8 years on? And now that he's gone and torn that again, is that going to be an extra complication, just the time factor it's been since the first injury, or is any sort of knee reconstruction going to be a real pain no matter how long it is after an original?
Yeah, anytime you're dealing in that, kind of multi-ligamentous knee world, always going to be a longer recovery than kind of your standard, single ligamentous recon. And then as you start to add on the, revision scenario, you're going to push that back even further, at least a year at a minimum of recovery if he's, thinking about trying to try the sports thing again. But you can even maybe push that out 14, 15, 16 months. It all depends on how quickly that muscle kind of comes back, your quad comes back.
Dr. Brandon Seifert, Nebraska Orthopedic Center, a Jock Doc Wednesday. Nick Chubb and the season-ending, perhaps career-ending knee injury that happened Monday night. Very gruesome, wasn't even replayed on TV. And we're all thinking about Nick Chubb just as the warrior he's been, coming back from something similar to this in his college days, and a great run in the NFL. Dr. Brandon, always love getting your perspective. Thanks for a few minutes.
You bet, fellas. Hey, take care.
Good to spend time with Dr. Brandon Seifert, Nebraska Orthopedic Center. Man, Nick Chubb, such a incredible player. Many of you have had him on fantasy, and quite frankly, you don't even think about that. You think about the dude dealing with injury and trying to come back. We'll wind down on Wednesday next.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time today. Now, Single Barrel, where we are at tomorrow, 9th and P inside the Graduate. Come get a steak or a chop or a whiskey or a beer. Or get all of them. Just get all fat and happy as you get the weekend kicked off. Schmidt and Elijah Herbel. As you can find the podcast, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, the YouTube channel. Subscribe to that as well with Hail Varsity. Review, good, bad, or ugly. We're good, whatever you want to say. So, Elijah, interesting. Nebraska able to land a new recruit, defensive back, wide receiver, athlete, Texas. The state, and pretty big for the Big Red as they continue to get things figured out on the recruiting front for 2024, 2025. Not a ton of spots left for Nebraska.
Yeah, and it's J.D. Crisp is the name. And I was wondering, Schmitty,
we were going to get there. We'll get there more tomorrow.
Yeah, and I've been wondering, is there any relation with he's dual sport, J.D. Crisp, football and baseball. Is there any relation to Coco Crisp? And I have found through some research, I don't believe so.
No.
I don't believe there's any
You had hopes up.
I had you going for a second because Nebraska does have the son of a very famous former professional baseball player on their team in Riley Van Poppel. His father,
right.
Todd Van Poppel.
You weren't born yet, but some of us schemed and plotted how to get Todd Van Poppel's rookie card because he was not only this next stud relief pitcher, the next Eckersley, but he was also acquired by Oakland, and Oakland was in their heyday with the Bash brothers in 1990. So, yeah, some of us know a lot about Riley Van Poppel's papa just because of our obsession with the Oakland A's back in the day. Cypress, Texas, where he's at, two-way stud. Second Baptist is where he's out of 6 foot 190 and the 25th player overall in the 2024 class. And, you look Nebraska going back to Texas. It's a good thing. And he'd love to play wide out, but if they think he's a defensive player, he says so be it. So we'll have some more thoughts tomorrow. Big show tomorrow. We told you we're at the Single Barrel. We'll have Brandon Vogel joining us from Counter Read. Gary Barnett, Coach Barney will check in. Reaction to the Buffs in Colorado State and all the mayhem that followed that. But more so, is Colorado ready for Oregon? As the Dion train chugs to Phil Knight's abode of Oregon. And just a great slew of games. We'll also get Barney's take on Harburg, what he saw, and where Nebraska can go with this offense. George Darlington will join us. I love Coach Darlington. He's doing football facts. 40 years of football facts in Omaha and in Lincoln. So Coach George will be with us in the 5 o'clock hour as well. Danny Burke, Burke's Best Bets. So we'll get you locked in on a Thursday night pick and some NFL/college options as well. And then if you're in Omaha, come see us at the Hail Varsity Sports Bar and Grill on Friday. All sorts of miles to put on and get locked in. I love it. I'm going to be on the road the rest of the week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So come find us, Single Barrel, or up in Omaha at the Hail Varsity Club in La Vista. Elijah, get dinner figured out. I will send you a picture of the T-bone.
And quickly, I just want to give a birthday shout out to listener Crew. He's always in the stream. It's his birthday
Crew,
today. Happy
God
birthday,
love it, Crew. Happy birthday.